I'm not an expert on that, but I would say that it was normative for, after the Civil War, for schools to be created alongside of parishes, colored missions. And the idea was that in order to be equipped to function in society, the new freedman class had to be educated. And the Episcopal Church got that right. And so the church, and this is a very Anglican thing. If you go see Anglican missions in Africa and elsewhere, you'll see schools and often hospitals attached to congregations, and it was seen as part and parcel of the same gospel. Not to my knowledge, I think the Episcopal Church, while doing its work and maintaining and being influenced by a racist way of looking at things, always tried to maintain the appearance of doing the right thing. So anything blatant, like establishing a color department like that, would be unhelpful. The closest thing, of course, we had, I was staff officer of the Black Ministry, and in a former life that was called Secretary of the Negro Work. And I said, if you call a horse a noble steed, it's still a horse. So when I was Secretary of the Negro Work, I ministered to black congregations and tried to effect kind of a rapprochement between black and white, but it was always part of the whole church. It wasn't a separate church. That would be, they always had to look like they're doing the right thing. I think that's a given, that's accepted by most people. And of course, to clarify, as a follow-up to Dr. Mead's queries, we didn't split it the same way as the Presbyterian Methodists, who actually just had a new legal entity created. We never went that far, but we had a de facto separation through the fact that the Federal Episcopal Church did exist.
Instead of the jury in that case.
Instead of the jury, right. Oh, this is true. Yeah. I think I'm a Yankee too, but that was not unheard of in the North. You may remember that Absalom Jones and his friend were in the balcony at St. George's Methodist Church in Philadelphia. And one of the things about black-white relations is numbers. That is to say, even today, there are congregations who pride themselves on having a few black people in their midst. It makes them feel good. When that number increases, they say, won't you join this or that group, best for you? And then you may even be heavily altogether. But when the numbers get to the 50-50 mark, the next thing historically white people have done is seize the positions of authority, because the unwritten rule is if you're not in the numerical majority, you have to at least be in charge. And when neither the numbers nor the authority are present, all of a sudden that church becomes too far to drive to. So there's a sense in which Absalom Jones was evicted because he did such a good job as kind of a black missionary in the neighborhood that the numbers of blacks became uncomfortable, and that's why they were ushered to do it. So that's a phenomenon north and south. It is said, I read somewhere, and I can't remember where, that at Bishop Delaney's first confirmation service, his two of his daughters, Bessie and Sadie, who wrote that famous book, Having Our Say, when they came to the church where he was administering confirmation, were ushered to the balcony. So the father, as the officiant, didn't cut any mustard. I think they will say that things are a lot better than Grandpa said they were, and that we have moved along. I think even as I painted, in some cases, a dismal picture of our history, that you could see that there were some improvements and some gleams of light and some realizations of truth along the way. I think we are at a different place now than we were even when I was ordained a little over 40 years ago. So, and I think we have a lot to adjust to. I remember that I was reading about, in preparation for my next book, how the church began to disintegrate over this, that, and the other. People often point to Dean Robinson as the culprit, but I maintain that's not true. One priest in LA who decided that his parish would become part of the church in Uganda, when asked why he was leaving, he said, I've always loved the Episcopal Church, but it has gone downhill ever since the Civil Rights Movement. Isn't that an amazing statement? So what he was saying was that first, black people got a piece of the pie, then women came and asserted themselves in the middle of all that, prayer book got changed, and then gay people were like the last straw. All of these things threatened white, straight, male hegemony, and so therefore was suspect. So the church is changing, folks. When I went to Yale Divinity School, I was approached by AME and Baptist black students who wanted to know why it was that I was in a white church. I said, I didn't know I was. I grew up in St. Philip, and we had 2,000 black people, 3 black priests, 6 candles, 2,000. And the only white Episcopalian I saw for years in my childhood was the Bishop of Long Island, who came to confirmation. So the black church was, the Episcopal Church was a black experience. I think as we go forward, we are recognizing the authenticity of people, regardless of where they come from. There's a certain, how should I put it, arrogance, you might call it. I remember when I was a tutor at General Seminary, I was in charge of about 8 or 10 students in their first year. And so some of them had not yet been confirmed, although they were in seminary, go figure. And they had found Jesus on an overnight retreat. And instead of going to church and being part of the rank and file, now to use the newfound Christianity, they decided to be a leader of the church, and they had all the answers and dismissed everything else that happened in 2,000 years. Nonetheless, although they were new to the church, they wondered why I, as a black man, was in it. So I said, well, let's put it this way. Many years ago, I went to the island of Barbados. I went to St. Lucy's Parish Church, and I found the baptismal register where my grandmother had been baptized in 1900. And then went outside, and her parents and grandparents were buried in the churchyard. I said, well, those are my annual credentials. What are yours? And Scripture says, from that moment on, they durst not ask any more questions.